What is your view in terms of the number of Fed moves that we're going to see? Is it 3 or more?
I think it's, at the moment, it's definitely sitting around 3. I think there could be a possibility, especially if we see increased growth out of the US on the back of the tax reform, that it could go further. But definitely at the moment, the Fed have been very good at giving us forward guidance over the last year or 2 years, and I think we'll stick firmly with 3 at the moment.
3?
I think what you're trying to do is whether it's 3 or 4 or it's 2, you're trying to preempt what inflation is going to be, and I think to try and preempt what inflation is going to be is the hardest thing ever. I don't think even the Fed know where inflation. The Fed are quite openly saying they don't know where inflation is going. So I think at the moment it looks like 3, 4. But I think that can change depending on inflation trends.
Okay. So, Nick, right now, what does it mean in your view for treasuries? Jason and I have been speaking about it this morning. Jason's short treasuries. Is that the right trade?
Yeah, I'd probably give over to Jason's greater expertise in the treasury market and go with him. I think short treasuries is probably the way to go, especially if you start to believe some of the news that we heard out of the Far East last week, specifically China, I suppose.
Nick, talk to us about the currencies then. Where's the dollar headed in your view?
I think for the short term, we'll see a continuation of this move to the downside, where the New Year's started off. But my more medium-term view is that we will see the dollar appreciate, probably against most of the majors, in line with that prospect of 3 rate hikes coming. But then, once again, in line with what Jason said before, we will be waiting and watching all the data that comes from the US, and that will certainly change any view on the dollar as we move through the year.
Nick, do you have a difference in your opinion between dollar EM and say dollar G10?
Yeah, I think EM could get hit even harder. So I think the dollar could appreciate stronger against the emerging markets currencies. G10, I think we're going to be still in relatively familiar ranges as we move through the year, but I think we will see the dollar appreciate. So calling a top to the euro or the cable at the moment is probably a tricky thing to do. But certainly I think as the year progresses, we hopefully will see stronger numbers out of the US, and that will lead to a stronger US dollar.
Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I'm a massive US Treasury hawk. I think you've got to be really careful of, and I think Nick mentioned this as well, the dollar is not just the dollar, it's a series of crosses nowadays, right? It used to be just dollar up, dollar down, right, because every income was in sympathy of the dollar. Nowadays, you've got some real idiosyncratic kind of things going on in Europe and in Japan and in UK and in China. So you've got this, what is the dollar, right? Is it, you've got to be really specific about the cross that you're looking at, because I think if you're looking at, people look at the DXY, well, that's just a function of sort of 3 or 4 big crosses. It's not a function of anything else. So I think you're going to get some good dollar strength against EM. I don't think that at all necessarily against the euro. I think the same with the yen. I think the yen could still appreciate some more as we go through this whole debate around the back end of the JGB curve. I think sterling's super interesting. I've been the only bull on sterling, I think, on the planet, and I love that trade.
Yeah.
I love sterling. Everyone hates it and sends me lots of emails to tell me how much they hate me about sterling, but it makes me love it even more.
Okay, Nick, argue your point on sterling. What's your view?
Strangely enough, I tend to agree with Jason. I think.
Oh, you're not the only bull.
I think Brexit's. No. I think Brexit's added a hell of a lot of volatility to the sterling and the cable market, and I think specifically the City of London will engineer a fairly good soft Brexit. We will be trading that volatility fairly hard on fresh news as the year goes through. But I think I anticipate that news, certainly Brexit, and on the pound to be better as we move through 2018. So yeah, I'm happy being a sterling bull, and I think it goes back to what Jason was saying before. Maybe not necessarily against the US dollar, but against the crosses. So certainly, I think euro sterling may have some space to the downside, and I think crosses like sterling Aussie as well will recover and move more to the top side.